Hey friends, welcome back to another Great Commission Alliance training. I hope that you've subscribed to our YouTube channel. That's the Great Commission Alliance media channel on YouTube. If not, we'd be honored if you do that right now. We're going to get started today with a training on how to reach the younger generations. For too many years, the church has missed opportunity after opportunity to reach young people, and we are at a time where we can no longer afford to make that mistake. Let's start with a passage. I'm going to read 1 Corinthians 9, verses 16 through 23. And we're going to see here some principles about reaching these younger generations. We read, "For when I preach the gospel, I cannot boast, since I am compelled to preach. Woe to me if I do not preach the gospel. If I preach voluntarily, I have a reward. If not voluntarily, I am simply discharging the trust committed to me. What then is my reward? Just this, that in preaching the gospel, I may offer it free of charge, and so not make full use of my rights as a preacher of the gospel. Though I am free and belong to no one, I have made myself a slave to everyone to win as many as possible. To the Jews, I became like a Jew to win the Jews. To those under the law, I became like one under the law, though I myself am not under the law, so as to win those under the law. To those not having the law, I became like one not having the law, though I am not free from God's law, but am under Christ's law, so as to win those not having the law. To the weak, I became weak to win the weak. I've become all things to all people, so that by all possible means I might save some. I do all this for the sake of the gospel, that I may share in its blessings." Here's what I want you to catch from that passage. If you're looking at younger generations thinking they have to meet us where we're at, they have to come to our church and we aren't going to accommodate them, you are absolutely missing the point of this passage. It is imperative that the body of Christ reach out to these younger generations where they are at. We need to meet them where they're at with the gospel. I'm going to give you principles that will help you do this with both the millennials and the Zoomers. So let's get started with the millennials. The millennials are the 23 to 39-year-olds. This is a huge demographic in our society. It's about almost 1/4 of our current population. This is not a small group of people. We've put together 6 R's that are going to help you know how to reach these millennials. These 6 R's are things that are absolutely descriptive of that generation. They are real, reliant, relevant, revolutionary, relational, and roll. They want to roll in what's happening. Let's go ahead and jump into each of these and talk briefly about them. First is real. Millennials yearn for authenticity. That's not to say that they are always authentic with us. Many millennials put what they want the world to see on their social media. So they yearn for authenticity, but you might not always expect that of them on their social media feeds. But the same goes for you and I as well, whatever generation you're from. We want the world to see the best picture of us oftentimes. That being said, though, if we are going to reach millennials where they are at, it is imperative that we learn to reach them in an authentic way. We need to be honest with them about our struggles, about what we're trusting God with. We need to be honest with them about things that we've had doubts about and answers that we've found. We must be real and authentic in our ministry to them. We must be people of integrity. We must reach them where they're at in an authentic kind of way. The next thing is reliant, and I want to be very careful how I talk about this. Many people have heard that millennials have a bad work ethic and you can't trust them because they live with mom and dad till they're 40 or 50. And I just want to mention that saying those things could come across in a very condescending way to millennials. So if you're a leader, don't talk like that to those millennials and then expect to reach them because you've just told them that you think very low of them. Whether or not it is true that they might have a sense of entitlement or a bad work ethic, whether or not that's true is not the point. What we need to do is reach them where they are at in an encouraging way, not turning them away or burning a bridge with them. So be careful how you talk about those types of issues with millennials. And here's something I want you to catch. They are reliant in many ways. Yes, they might rely on mom and dad a little more than previous generations. They're also facing some difficulties that maybe previous generations didn't have to face. Whatever the case, though, their reliant abilities have enabled them to use technology and to find answers to questions. We can use those strengths that millennials offer. Okay, the next thing I want you to catch here is relevant. Millennials are absolutely focused on things that are relevant today. You could almost think of it like a gift card versus a savings account. Most millennials want to know how this is going to impact them now, today. So they might be much more interested in dinner with friends than a training for 6 months from now. We need to accommodate that in our ministry by making ministry relevant to that demographic today. Do things that are going to help them spend time together in relationship. That's the next one we're going to get to, in a way that is relevant, but also that involves a ministry application. So like I said, the next one is relational. Millennials are highly relational. And this is something that I think is a wonderful attribute of this generation. They love being with friends. Now, some of the attributes that I've already described feed into this one. And so when we get to this one, I think it's important to remember this is kind of a broad one that describes the generation well. They're highly relational and they want relationships. They would much rather work with friends than work for lots of money. They want to do things together. You've heard over and over this do life together phrase in Christian churches. A lot of that has to do with reaching millennials. We need to reach them in a relational way. I want to give you a quick warning here, though. That does not mean that we have to build a relationship before we share the gospel. That's a lie. You can share the gospel with anyone. The gospel is the power of God unto salvation. But as we share the gospel, do it in a loving way and be ready to reach them relationally through evangelism, but in a continuing way of follow-up after that point. The next one is revolutionary, and this is another attribute that I love about millennials. They want change, and they want to see things better in the future than when they inherited it. You remember hearing about hope and change? That was the mantra, I believe, of the millennial generation. They're revolutionaries in so many different ways. And again, as believers, this is such an awesome attribute that we can use for the Lord. Help them embrace the revolution of the Great Commission rather than so many other false revolutions in our day and age. Okay, the final attribute I want to mention here is role. They want to have a role in things. They don't want to just passively look from the sides. In past generations, people wanted to come to church and watch the pastor do a killer job and preach an awesome sermon and have the building look nice. Millennials aren't looking for that. They are looking to come and be a part of what's going on. And we need to draw them in and include them in what we're doing. So pastors, leaders, take those young Christians in your churches, those millennial Christians, and involve them throughout in all that you're doing. Give them a role. Help them get their hands on what's going on. So let me give you a quick summary here. Millennials, they make up nearly a quarter of our population. About 25% of that group claims to have no religion, no faith whatsoever. Many shifted to the so-called nones in this generation. We need to reach them with the gospel. The harvest is still ripe with them. Many have not been presented with a clear defense of the Christian faith, and they have heard so many lies attacking it. You know what? Get good at apologetics with this group. You could use our Best Facts tract or our Best Facts workbook in your ministry to millennials. These are important resources. I also want to encourage you to relationally disciple millennials that come to Christ. You could use our Following Jesus Discipleship Workbook or some of our other resources. but you have to reach them and engage them relationally, and then use good resources, and please don't forget apologetics. One more note is that millennials are technologically savvy, and so there are a lot of strengths with that, but also some weaknesses. One is pornography. It's prevalent on smartphones and in so many other ways. So in your ministry to millennials, be careful to help them with those technological and digital temptations. Be wise in how you work through those things with them. Here's my challenge about millennials. They are ready to be reached for Christ, and they are ready to be sent into His Great Commission harvest. So let's talk about Zoomers. This is another important demographic that we can't forget, but many Christians have all but neglected them. The Zoomers, or the Generation Z members, are the 8 to 22-year-olds. They are in high school and college right now. They are the future of our nation. They are the future of our world. They also make up almost 1/3 of our population. If you're following with me, you're probably realizing that the Zoomers and Millennials together make up more than half of our current population in America. I hope you caught that. We can't afford to miss these two generations. So the Zoomers make up almost 30% of the population. There are 6 Ds that describe them. They are digital, they are diverse, they are distracted, they are depressed, they are disruptive, they are driven. I'm going to go through each of these over the next few minutes. Let's start with digital. The Zoomers are highly digital. They don't know a time without smartphones and social media. This can be a hard thing in some ways, but it can also be a benefit because they can use social media to reach the world for Jesus. This is the future. We have to reach them so they can reach the world. But they have never known a non-digital time. That's who they are. It's similar with diversity. They have never known an undiverse society. They have grown up in a culture that embraces the LGBTQ plus lifestyles, that is full of many forms of workplace diversity. And without jumping into those issues on this training, I just want to encourage you that when we relate to them, we have to relate to them carefully on these topics. Because the second we come in too harsh or too hard, you might come across in a way that is burning a bridge with the Zoomers. Do not forsake biblical truth, but please be sensitive to discuss biblical truth in a loving way. I want to encourage you to go to Calibrate Ministries for more information on how to do that with the LGBTQ plus community specifically. Okay, so they are highly diverse. I want to encourage you, focus on the gospel as you're sharing with them, and don't get distracted by conversations that might distract from the gospel. This is maybe a surprise to some people. The Zoomers are highly driven. They were children in the time of the 2008 recession, many of them. They remember the chaos of those times, and they have responded by being highly driven in the workplace. This is another thing that I think we can utilize for the Lord. They will be driven for His Great Commission and for ministry if we can reach them for Christ. You know, Zoomers are also very distracted. You might see they're always looking at cell phones. That's their culture. Let's learn to reach them where they're at with social media, etc., rather than just condescendingly criticizing them for their digital distractions. They are distracted, but we can still reach them relationally. They have all the same questions and desires that humans have for millennia. Let's reach them where they're at. And we need to reach them where they're at. You know, Zoomers have been called the most depressed generation. These stats might terrify you. They've been called the saddest generation. They've been called the most anxious generation. They are, quote, disproportionately higher rates of depression, psychological distress, and suicidal thoughts and actions. These characteristics are so sad, but it's where they really are. A recent study found that 89% of Zoomers feel their lives are meaningless. They are sad, they're depressed, they have suicidal tendencies, and they feel their lives are meaningless. They've also been called and been found to be the loneliest generation ever surveyed and the most stressed. Guys, if you ever thought we've missed the next generation, I want to encourage you, they are waiting to be reached. They are sad, they are depressed, they are distracted, they are discouraged, they feel their lives are meaningless, and we have the answers. Okay, the last D is disruptive. Because of a lot of those attributes that I just shared with you, they are willing to burn the system down. The millennials were revolutionary and are revolutionary, but the Zoomers take it to the next level and they're disruptive. They're willing to destroy things. They're hurting on the inside and they don't care what comes out in some instances. You know what? Instead of attacking them for that, realize that some of what you see on TV, the riots and so forth, those are the outward manifestations of an inward need for Jesus. So share the gospel with them. Okay, so remember how I told you there was a historic shift to the nuns among the millennials? Well, this is a little bit surprising, but that has ended with the Zoomers. We don't see a shift away from Christianity among the Zoomers. That's not to say, though, that we're reaching them well, because many still don't know Jesus, and we need to reach the Zoomers. So we have to be strategic. Again, the harvest is ripe. We need to reach them with Christ's compassion. Share your faith boldly with Zoomers. Be a friend to them. A lot of them don't have that. They're very lonely and depressed. So share the hope that you have with Zoomers. And again, like with millennials, you might have to use some evidence because they've spent a whole lifetime hearing faith and Christianity specifically attacked. So be ready to go through some good apologetics with them. Again, I would encourage you, use our best facts tract when you share with Zoomers. Share the gospel first, but use the tract to work through objections if you need to. And with Christian Zoomers, go through some decent apologetics training with them. And also, make sure you could use our discipleship resources to disciple them one-on-one. Hey, those are a few attributes of reaching millennials and Zoomers, and I hope they've encouraged you in your ministry. I hope that you'll take the initiative to become everything to every person in order that some might be saved. Please don't just throw in the towel and say, well, we've lost those generations, or those generations are crazy. I want you to catch something. If you think those generations are crazy, I want you to flip the script and realize that some of what looks crazy is really them looking for a savior and searching further than many before them have to find that Savior. Please reach out to them with the love and compassion of Christ and share the gospel boldly. Jesus tells us to go and make disciples of all nations, and that includes the millennials and the Zoomers. So we can't be passive about His Great Commission command, and we have to reach millennials and Zoomers where they are at. Remember, I want to summarize and close with this. The 6 R's of reaching millennials. They are real, they are reliant, they are relevant, they are relational, they are revolutionary, and they want to roll in what we're doing. And the 6 D's of reaching those Zoomers, they're digital, diverse, driven, distracted, depressed, and disruptive. Remember those attributes as you reach them with the gospel. Some things never change. This is the only truth that we can build our lives on. And the gospel is the power of God unto salvation. So stick with those fundamentals that are good for all people of all times. And remember to meet millennials and Zoomers where they're at as you reach out to them with the gospel as well. Hey, thanks so much for watching this short training on reaching younger generations.